Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, How to Identify Suspicious Documents and Prepare for Handwriting Examination. In today's webinar, Ms. Wong will discuss graphology, watermarks, ink dots, and signatures, common types of forgery, external factors that can have an effect on handwriting, and disputed documents. To give you a little background about our presenter, Cina Wong, she has more than 24 years of experience as a board-certified and court-qualified forensic handwriting expert and document examiner. She has assisted law firms, CPAs, small businesses, Fortune 500 companies, and individuals with uncovering fraud and forgery. She has provided services in high-profile cases that have been featured on many television programs. Attendees who require a passcode, the word for today is documents. During the Q&A session, we will ask that you enter this passcode into the Q&A widget for CLE reporting purposes. The Q&A is located to the left of your screen. Please remember that if you are applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself and stay for the full 60 minutes. You are also required to complete the survey at the end of the program. Tomorrow morning, we will send out an email with a link to the archive recording of the webinar. The slides can be downloaded from this list to the left of your screen. Thank you all again for attending today, and Cina, the presentation is now turned over to you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate it. Hi, I'm Cina Wong, and I'm a forensic handwriting expert and document examiner. And usually when I introduce myself as so, people will tell me, gee, that's an unusual profession. What made you get into that? Well, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, when I was 14 years old, my parents, like any other parent, you want your child to have the best education possible. So my parents sent me to one of the best schools in Silicon Valley, California, to get an education that would help me, get a step forward in life. And I was 14 at the time, and unfortunately, at that time period, I was the only Chinese student in the school. And unfortunately, there were a group of girls who did not look highly upon that I was different than the rest of them. So one night, this was a boarding school, after we had study hall, we were allowed to go out and hang around the rec room. But before I was able to go out into the rec room, there was a knock on my bedroom door, and there were 10 girls there. And they pushed the door in, knocked me down, and they gagged me, tied me, cut me up, and severely beat me up. And after that incident, I started receiving death threat notes that were put underneath my bedroom door. And someone even snuck into my room while I was at school during the day, and they wrote with fake vampire's blood on the mirror in my bedroom, "You will die in your sleep tonight." Obviously, I'm here talking to you today, so that didn't happen. But the school principal did hear that I was receiving death threat notes, and he asked me to bring these death threat notes to him. And he was going to turn them over to a handwriting expert at the police station, and that this handwriting expert would determine who was writing these death threat notes to me, and that the principal was going to try and do something to stop it. 3 months went by, and when I went to visit the principal, he said that he had not heard back from the handwriting expert, and he looked at me straight in the eye and said, "I never ever want you to ask me about this again. You're never allowed to discuss it with anybody." And he slammed the door in my face. And I remember staring at the maple wood grain on the door, and I made a promise to myself that someday I'm going to become a handwriting expert so I can have the skill to help myself in case this ever happens again, and to help other victims of handwriting crime. And that's what started my journey to become a handwriting expert, and that's why I'm a handwriting expert today. And I was also, because of my journey, I was called in to help in the JonBenet Ramsey civil case that took place in Georgia. And John and Patsy Ramsey wrote a book where they implied that there was a certain person who was a journalist was a murderer of their daughter, and that gentleman sued for libel, and I was brought in that suit to look at the ransom note and compare it to handwriting samples of John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, and the journalist. And in that case, it was my opinion that it was highly probable that the mother had penned the ransom note. And I want to extend this to say that just because it was my opinion that it was highly probable that she wrote the ransom note, it doesn't mean that she committed the murder. But that was one of the larger cases that I've worked on. And you don't have to look too far these days to see where handwriting crimes are taking place. You just look at the news headlines, you'll see that there's forgery and document fraud all over the place. And these crimes are committed by people from all walks of life. And just from these headlines here, you'll see that it took place in a law firm, that there was a bank employee, examiner, a chief of police, and a caretaker. In the slides you're looking in front of you, it kind of shows you the extent of what people will go through to pull off a fraud. And this happens in New York, and a gentleman's mother passed away. And but he wanted to still collect her Social Security benefit. So when he took his mother to the funeral home, he gave the funeral home a fake Social Security number with a fake birth date. And then he was able to disguise himself as his mother, and you will see that in the left of the picture in the red jacket and the blonde wig. That's the gentleman dressing up as his mother. And to the right of the screen is a friend of his who is posing as the nephew. And they went to the bank and cashed checks this way, and also went to the DMV to renew a driver's license. So the alleged mother there at the figure would have a license to be able to cash the checks. So it's the different degrees of fraud that take place. They're actually, it's just unending what people will do. Graphology. So the reason why I wanted to talk about graphology is because there's two areas of handwriting, and I just wanted to clarify for you what those are. And many people don't know that there's a distinction. So the first area of handwriting is graphology, and that is when someone looks at a handwriting and they say that they're able to discern what your personality is from your handwriting. And that's not what I do, and that's not what a document examiner does, and that's what we're talking about today is document examination. And what a document examiner looks at is that we authenticate documents by looking at the document, what it's made of and how it's created, and we also examine the signature and the writing and other things that may be on the document that would help to authenticate it and let us know whether it's genuine or not. And the most important thing that you see on the bottom of that slide is that we do not determine personality from handwriting. So when you're looking for a qualified forensic document examiner, what are some of the things that you should be looking for? So, well, of course, you want to ask for their curriculum vitae, and it would list their training, and you want to make sure that the training that's listed on their curriculum vitae has to specifically do with document examination and not graphology, because the training in the area of forensic document examination is very different than the training that graphologists partake in. You also want to see continuing education in the field of forensic documents. You would also like to inquire as to the years that they have been practicing in the field. You want to know if have they qualified in court. And unfortunately, there's no college degree for forensic document examination, so that's why you have to take into consideration all of the education and training that specific document examiner has had. And if that document examiner is certified, then you should ask, what did you do to receive your certification? And you want to find out whether they took a test, what type of test it was it a written test? Was it a take-home test? Did they have to take this conference? Was it a proctored exam? Those are all questions that you should ask. So as a document examiner, what types of things do we examine? Here's a list of some items that you'll see that obviously handwriting and hand printing, We also deal with numbers and dates because sometimes those are altered. We also look at watermarks on a piece of paper, and I'll show you an example of that later. We look at rubber stamp signatures, if there's a fake notary stamp involved, page substitutions. Sometimes it's important to know whether there's different types of ink on a document that people have signed with different inks, or do they all sign with the same pen? If the writing was sequential, and that's very important with medical records and documents. If there's photocopy fraud, sometimes it's a photocopy of a signature that someone's cut out of a document and pasted it on another document. The signature may look authentic, but it wasn't meant to be on that document. We look at indented writing, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Anonymous writing, which you will find on items like a ransom note, and also letters that people will send to, threatening letters to other people, and disguised writing. So I mentioned to you about a watermark, and this is actually a piece of stationery that most businesses will have. And this is with a light table that I put the paper on, and the watermark will tell you the company who created that piece of paper. And with some government documents, the government will have their own special watermark for that agency or for that office. And so by looking at a watermark and the information we derive from that, it will tell us when that piece of paper was produced. So why would that be important? Well, if you get a piece of paper and on it is a contract, and allegedly that contract was supposed to have been signed in 1980, but when you take a picture of the watermark and do research on this watermark, you might find out that that piece of paper did not exist until 2000. So that document that's allegedly dated 1980 could not have existed in 1980 because the paper was not created until the year 2000. So that's how a watermark can be helpful. And as a document examiner, our expertise extends to printers and photocopy machines. And what can these machines tell us? Well, with a color printer and or a color photocopy machine, there are yellow dots printed on the back of the documents that are hard to see with the naked eye unless you know what to look for and unless you use special light, which most document examiners have. And these ink dots on the back of the document appear on the color documents, and they have certain types of information that are useful to a case. And this image is from EFF.org, and that's from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And my friend Seth Schoen was the one who discovered all of this information, and it's allowed me to share this with you. And he plotted the dots on the back of the document, and this is what he came up with. And it was like breaking a cryptic code. And he found out that on all of the machines, this code will tell you the date the document was created, the time it was created, the serial number of the machine that it came from. So this is helpful information because it was a case, and I believe it was in Denmark, that a group of people, they were passing counterfeit money. And through these dots that were visible to the naked eye, they were able to trace the printer it came from and the printer that it was, and the people or the group that it was registered to, and that's how they were able to find out who was counterfeiting the currency. So it was fascinating that this was uncovered. So even though you print a document and you don't see any important information in it, there is. The common types of forgeries that a forensic document examiner will run into are traced forgeries, where someone traces a signature, traces an authentic signature, a simulated signature where they look at a signature and try to emulate it and make it look like the authentic signature the best they can, and a freehand signature where sometimes if someone steals a check out of your mailbox, they don't know what your signature looks like, so they just scribble a signature the best they can. But I'm going to show you an example right now of how a trace forgery is done. But actually, before that, when you some of the things to look for in a signature to show whether it's authentic or not authentic, you will find shakiness in the strokes sometimes in a non-authentic signature, only if the authentic signature does not have the shakiness, because sometimes you are dealing with a signature of someone who has tremor. So if the normal signature normally does not have tremor, but the question one does, then you have to take that into consideration that, is that a sign of it being non-genuine, that the signature lacks fluidity, which means it's written awkwardly, that someone's having difficulty. It doesn't look as fluid as an authentic signature. Is the signature that you're looking at, the question signature, is it aligned on the signature line correctly or incorrectly? Is it within the range of how someone normally uses the signature line? Patching, which is someone made a mistake and they have to go back and use the pen and patch over it. That's a sign. Is there abnormal stopping of the pen? Because I kind of mentioned if someone's trying to emulate a signature, they're writing the signature and they're not sure where the signature goes next, so they stop their pen and they look at the authentic signature before they go on. So you'll see a lot of ink blots where the pen stops. And is there heavy or an unusual pressure pattern, which means maybe someone's writing it slower or are they tracing it? So here is an example of a trace signature as I promised. And I've broken it down of how some people would create a trace signature. So what you have here is you have a blank document that is placed over a document with an authentic signature on it. And so and I have a light table underneath this, and you'll see on the left side of the photo, James, where the pen went over the name, James, but they have not gone over the D. Wilson part yet. And when you're making an indentation line of a signature, it leaves indentation marks on a document. And so I showed you one method where someone traced over, in the previous example, over a signature. In another method, they'll make indentation marks on the document with something with a stylus or something that's sharp that doesn't produce ink. And what you have is a document with these indentations on it where you see the signature. It's still the same signature I used before, James B. Wilson. And here is when the person tries to fill in the indented lines with the ink, but the problem is you can't write the same way twice each time. So you have trouble getting the pen lines exactly into the indentation mark. So that's why when you magnify this and use lighting, you will see that the ink lines don't exactly match up with the indentation lines. And you'll see a lot of trace signatures in elder abuse cases. Financial elder abuse is something that's running rampant right now, and it's unfortunately it's happening to too many people. And trace forgeries are used a lot, and if the person is a caretaker and is familiar with the person, they get more adept at writing the signature. They won't need to use the trace forgery technique. They will just use the simulation technique where they simulate the signature. So what are the signs of elder abuse or elder financial abuse? If you see that there is more banking activity taking place on that person's account when they normally very rarely use the account, except for special purposes like depositing a check and withdrawing certain amount of money for maybe paying for the mortgage for the house, but they're not withdrawing large amounts. But all of a sudden, you'll see activity where large amounts of money are being withdrawn from the elderly bank account. you'll see an increased number of checks written to the caregiver or certain members of the family. You'll see that all of a sudden, perhaps the signature card changes and there's an addition of another person on the card. And there are legitimate cases for this, but other times maybe the elder person feels as if their caregiver won't help them out, and the caregiver pushes them, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to add me onto your signature card. And the elder person feels pressured to do so. And a lot of these things happen at the bank, and the bank teller should have more training and be more aware that these issues are happening. And if you do a credit check on the elder person's account, you'll also find out that there are more credit card accounts being opened and connected to that elder person's credit record. And I mentioned as caregivers are a big issue with the elder financial fraud, but there are also other people involved, and here is a list of them. And unfortunately, there are people in all professions that aren't as professional as they should be. We have here lawyers, financial advisors, and there are guardian or court-appointed conservators, clergymen, accountants, and also repairmen. And there are many more, but these are the ones that have come up most often for me in the caseloads that I get. Besides elder financial fraud, with the downturn in the economy, there have been certain cases that seem to have that pop up more in my caseload, and they happen to do with wills. I get a lot of questioned will cases, holographic wills, which are handwritten wills. The entirety of the will is handwritten, and also your regular typewritten wills with a signature, real estate contracts and deeds. There are a lot of quitclaim deeds where someone allegedly signed their property over to somebody else, which never happened. Promissory notes, check fraud, a lot of misappropriation of funds. There are quite a few cases where bank accounts have just been wiped out by caretakers or family members emptying out the checking account, power of attorneys, and medical directives. And there's a specific case, actually, where an attorney, an estate planning attorney, actually allegedly killed her father with a forged power of attorney and advanced medical directive. And supposedly she went to her father's home where she shot and stabbed her father and his longtime girlfriend. And when she called 911, she claimed that there was, she came to her father's home and she saw this horrible scene of her father being stabbed and shot, and same with his girlfriend. When the girlfriend was dead when the ambulance arrived, but they took the father to the hospital, and that's where this attorney handed over to the hospital a forged power of attorney, giving her power of attorney, and also a forged medical directive stating that her father had specific wishes not to be resuscitated, so which would be a DNR, do not resuscitate. And because of that, the hospital followed followed the medical directive and did not resuscitate the father, and he passed away. So in this case, a forged medical directive can be as dangerous as a gun or a knife to shorten someone's life. So just because a pen is not regulated like a gun, what you can do with a pen is just as dangerous. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, and it definitely was so in this case.
Okay, could all the attendees please type the passcode into the Q&A? Our first question is there a margin of error in handwriting examination?
Yes, this is a difficult one. It's a great question. It's a difficult one to measure because you're dealing with document examiners who have a different level of education, and that's the most important thing that you need to do is to find out their education in the field, that they're having continuing education. And what I do is that I take a test through a collaborative testing services, and it's proficiency testing. So I get tested every year on how proficient I am in the field of document examination. So that's another great question you should ask the document examiner that you're intending to hire. Do you take proficiency testing? How well do you do on those tests? And that way you'll be able to find out with that document examiner how relevant their work is in the field of document examination.
Okay, the next question is, what is the acceptable margin of error for a criminal court case?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I will do research on that, and if that person will give you their name, I will look that up and see what I can come up with. But I don't know of a specific number of what that margin of error is, and you said it was a criminal court case, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So that might be part of a legal question, so I might have to also contact a colleague of mine who is a criminal attorney to be able to answer that for you.
Okay. The next question is it possible for an expert to detect forgeries from copies, or are original documents required?
Sometimes a document examiner is able to tell whether there was a forgery involved with photocopies of documents. Of course, originals are always the best type of document to have, but in a case of a photocopy fraud, so as I mentioned before, if someone took your signature, made a photocopy of it, and pasted it onto another document, you're never going to find the original in that one. But there are certain clues on the document of where that signature is placed. Maybe the person didn't do a very good job. That will show that there are signs that it was a photocopied signature. And I always recommend to people, and I know it's difficult, that if you're in business, to always keep, if you can, every piece of document that you've ever signed that goes out to either to the company, if it's a memo that goes out to a lot of people, because someone can use that signature for for a purpose that you don't want them to. And so by keeping a copy of it, if someone uses that signature and to put on a contract, which did happen in the case of mine, someone put it on a contract where the boss, where the employee said the boss signed over 50% of the company to him. You would go through all your records, find the exact signature, and that's how you're able to say, look, we have the exact copy of that signature. It's photocopy fraud. If there aren't any additional signs to show that that document was fraudulently done through photocopy. So, but again,
are there any marks on regular copy paper that? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, but originals always number one first, and yes, we can help out with photocopies, and if there's only photocopies, sometimes we give a qualified opinion. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Emily.
Oh, you're fine. Are there marks on regular copy paper that can pinpoint a year or time of creation?
It depends. If it's older photocopy paper, I would outsource that to a paper expert. And a paper expert would, by examining the fibers of the paper, they would be able to determine an approximate because of how that paper was made, because of the paper fibers and pulp, they would be able to approximate the type of year when that paper may have been created. But it's much more difficult with copy paper because a lot of copy paper these days uses recyclable materials as opposed to if you use fine grade paper that has a watermark on it.
Okay, the next question is, how many samples of handwriting are necessary to establish forgery?
It is different in every case. So in a photocopy fraud case, if someone has the exact document the signature came from, then you only need one. But in most of my cases where I'm authenticating a signature, for instance, let's choose a will, I would request for signatures from signatures of that person, of the signature in question. Let's just call her Jane Doe. I would request signatures of Jane Doe's signature from around the time period of when that will was allegedly signed. And as a document examiner, we need to be able to figure out the range of variation of that writer because we don't write the same way twice. We're not machines. And there's a certain range where we write different. Some people can write their lowercase a's 3 different ways, and some write their lowercase c's 5 different ways. And we need to find out what that range is and what the slants are and how that person's signature or writing relates to the writing line. So sometimes it can be 20, or sometimes it can be 50. And sometimes as document examiners, we work with what is available because we know it's difficult to get handwriting samples. And so that's what, and so our opinion might be qualified within a different range, that it's highly probable, that it's probable, and there are indications. And sometimes the document examiner, our opinion and our examination is only as good as the handwriting samples that are given to us. And sometimes we're not able to offer an opinion and say, we're inconclusive. So that can also happen. Do you have any additional questions, Emily?
Okay. One more question. Are there usually competing experts in handwriting cases that are litigated?
Oh, yes, there are. That is an excellent question, and they're probably wondering why, and I'll answer that ahead of time here. So sometimes there are experts going head-to-head, and you're wondering why, what can be the reason why can that happen? Well, number one, different education levels of the document examiner. So maybe one has more training and more updated training than the other. Two, that the document examiners both have different sets of handwriting samples to use in their examination. So it's important in a case for if there are 2 handwriting experts, and one on either side, that they both do their examination from the same documents, so that they each have the same set of documents to work with. Third, and other times, and I hate to say this, but sometimes out there are what they are called hired guns, and there are some experts in every field where if paid enough, they will offer an opinion favorable to that side.
Okay, we do have additional questions, but we will have another Q&A at the end of the presentation. So, Cina, feel free to continue on.
Sure. Thank you, Emily. So I just wanted to show you some older cases, which I did get permission to share in presentations. And so these are old cases that have already been tried or settled and are done with. So I had a client named Eddie Murphy, not the Eddie Murphy, but an Eddie Murphy. And this case took place 10 or 15 years ago. What happened is on the left-hand side, you will see the question signature of Eddie J. Murphy that appeared on a lease application to rent a retail building. And the attorney that retained me wanted to know whether Eddie J. Murphy really signed the signature that you see on your left. And to the right are known signatures of Eddie Murphy. And some of the things a handwriting expert will look at, and you'll see that on the left-hand side, the middle initial J, there's a big orange bracket. It shows how that letter J is larger than the E in Eddie or the M in Murphy, but on the right-hand side with the known signatures, you'll see that the J is smaller than the E or the M. And another feature is the Y in Murphy is on the left-hand side from the lease application. The question signature is a little oval loop. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that the ending of the Y is, it extends, partially underneath part of the signature and then back over to the right. And that's not enough to show that there are differences in the signature, but what the real important part of the signature is, on the left, there were other signatures on the question lease that you will see. The important thing is I took request handwriting samples from Mr. Murphy, and request handwriting samples are when you actually sit down with the person and you have them write out their signature multiple times on the document in question. So you would take the document in question, write out the question signature, and have that person sign that signature. And I noticed, if you look on the right-hand side, that Mr. Murphy constructed his middle initial J in 3 separate strokes. So it started from the signature line and went to the upper portion, to the upper right around 1 o'clock. That's 1 stroke. Lifted off the pen and put it down again. And then the orange, you'll see I highlighted in orange the second stroke, which comes downward and ends around 7 o'clock. And he lifts up the pen and he puts his pen down again, and you'll see the green stroke that goes all the way across to around 3 o'clock. And I asked him, I said, did you know that you made your middle initial J in 3 separate strokes? And he said, no, I didn't know that, but this is the way I was taught to write it. And I had to laugh because how document examiners tell whether what we look for in handwriting are deviations from the way we were normally taught to write. So I'm sure most of you know when you went to school, you had to take penmanship classes, and the teacher taught you how to write on the board. This is how you write your A's, your B's, your C's, and we had to copy the teacher the best we could, and we actually got graded on how well we emulated the way she wrote the alphabet, the letters in the alphabet. And if we didn't do that well, we were kind of graded, points were taken off. So that's copybook. And after a while, as we advanced in just 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, they stopped, grading us on how well our penmanship was. And so we started deviating from the way we were normally taught to write. And so it's those deviations that help handwriting experts identify what is special about that person's handwriting that is uniquely theirs. So in this case, Mr. Murphy's known J's, which are made in 3 different strokes, that's not how we were taught to write in copybook. That's the deviation. And if you look on the left-hand side of all the question signatures, you'll see that the middle initial J was all created in 1 continuous stroke. So that really helped us uncover in this case that Mr. Murphy did not sign the Eddie J. Murphy signatures on the question lease agreements. And as I mentioned earlier, I deal with a lot of will contest cases. And there was a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, kind of like the movie title, will case. And this was an actual will. It looks more like an inventory, but you'll see Mr. Smith's signature at the very top of the document. And this was considered the question holographic will in this case. This was a very fascinating case, and this took place in Virginia. Even though I opined that that was Mr. Smith's signature, the attorney was able to have this will discarded because, and I'm not an attorney, but something about the law that you're supposed to sign the document, especially a will, at the end of the document, not at the beginning of the document. And I guess that's for purposes of maybe perhaps having someone sign a blank document and then writing items below it, which is, which we don't know if that's what happened here, but that's what happened in this case. It was fascinating. In Virginia, you can actually buy a house for $10. Who would not want to buy a house for $10? Well, that's not exactly quite what happened in this case. There was a document in this case where a sister said that her ill sister who had cancer, who had passed away, left her the house. And in that house was still living the daughter of the sister who had cancer. And so in this case, the auntie was trying to kick out her niece from the house. And this was a document that was brought up. And this was the question signature. And if you look at it, can you think of what type of pen would create this type of look? It's not actually a pen. It's actually a rubber stamp signature. And if you look, this is actually an old rubber stamp, and so it looks like it was hand cut and is not very clear, and that's why you see in the J, the first letter in Jetty, it's kind of broken up. And you'll see that with a rubber stamp, that when you push it down, and this is not the self-inking stamp, this is like the old-fashioned, you have to put it on the stamp pad and push it down, that when this rubber stamp was pushed down, there was heavier pressure on the right-hand side than there was the left, and that's why Menzies comes out darker on the right-hand side as opposed to the first name Jetty. But when enlarged through a microscope, you can definitely see that this was a rubber stamp signature. I get calls from attorneys all the time telling me, I have a document, I know it's authentic because it's notarized. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean much to a document examiner because we know that just because a document is notarized does not mean it's authentic, unfortunately. And in this case, this is an old embossed notary stamp. And the letters are actually Rebecca on, if you see in the upper left-hand corner, Rebecca, Sue Heck. The font of that does not match the inside Commonwealth of Virginia. And there are still some other issues with this notary stamp, but it was not a genuine notary stamp. Just like when you go into a restaurant sometimes, and the restaurant says, sorry, no substitutions. Well, substitution is not a very good thing when it comes to documents also. So when with documents, we always prefer that we always tell people, please don't add any additional staple holes to it. Don't put any additional staples in it. Don't put paper clips over the document. Don't add anything to the document that wasn't originally there. Because in this case, it's a page substitution case. And if you look at the first page, that's to the bottom of the screen, there isn't a paperclip mark on that, but there's a paperclip mark on the second one and a slight one on the third one and the fourth one up above. So you don't want to, you want to preserve the evidence and not add additional evidence that may cloud the issues of the case. There are external factors that can have an effect on handwriting, and as you know, you've seen people who have had a stroke and they're not even able to hold a fork to feed themselves, and that will definitely affect their handwriting because they're not able to hold a pen. So if you look at the list I have here, there's all kinds of things that can affect handwriting, and so by requesting handwriting samples that you need to compare to a certain question signature writing from around the time period of when the question document allegedly took place, that will really help with the accuracy of the examination when the handwriting expert looks at it. And this is an example of a case where it's just an elderly handwriting that it's shaky. And I mentioned early on in one of the slides where certain signs of forgery, maybe shakiness in the handwriting, slow writing, but in this case, the two items I just mentioned are part of this person's handwriting because it belongs to an elderly person. So you have to assess. You can't take things out of context and say just because it's slow writing or just because it's shaky writing, it means it's a forgery. No, it has to be taken into consideration with the case itself and what's going on with the actual handwriting. So if you are presented with a disputed document, what do you need to do? And as part of the question earlier, someone asked me original or photocopy. So original, always the best. And second, the best copy. So if you have a first generation copy, that would be preferable. And a first generation copy is a copy that's made directly from the original. And a second generation copy is a copy made from that first generation. And things slowly start to degrade after that. So as a document examiner, we want the best possible copy. And please protect the documents, especially if it's in an original document, in a protective sleeve or envelope. And if a fingerprint examination and development needs to be done on the document, make sure you have a document examiner examine the document before it's sent off to the fingerprint expert, because develop the fingerprints on the document, it's a little destructive, and it turns the document a bright pink color. It depends on what type of technique they use, but it's not going to be it's not going to help the document examiner by having all of these fingerprints a developer on the document itself. So it's important to know this. What types of known samples should you get to compare to the question signature? Everyday business writing, and I mentioned contemporaneous, which are around the time period of when the question document is dated. Make sure that the documents are verifiable. You don't want to taint the pool with samples that may actually be forgeries, because if the handwriting expert is working with samples that are not actually authentic, then it's going to authenticate the question document if that is a forged document. You want comparable writing, so compare print to print, cursive to cursive. And I mentioned about a request writing session that I had with Mr. Murphy, and you would want to consult with a forensic handwriting expert for that, because the handwriting expert would sit down with the person to get handwriting samples from them, and there's a certain procedure that they'll go through to get that completed. You should, and this sounds silly, but photocopy all of your documents. I can't tell you the number of times where people don't make copies for themselves, and they will send me documents. Documents do get lost in the mail, so please make an entire set for yourself and send 2 sets to the document examiner, so the document examiner will have one for their file and one that they can make notation on if needed. And make a screenshot or take notes of this slide. It's important. Some of the things that have happened in the past and made me compile this list, but please don't write on the document. People highlight the signature in question. They draw arrows to it. They put another document on top and write on the question document, leaving indentation marks. And the indentation marks might be, the document examiner will notice that, and we don't know if it was actually there before or if it was added after the fact. I know it's very common in law offices that they'll punch holes in the documents, so please try not to do that. But just try not to touch the document and preserve it the best you can. And again, I'm Cina Wong, and I'm a board-certified document examiner, a forensic handwriting expert. And you have any additional questions, I can take those questions now.
Okay, and could all the attendees please type the passcode into the Q&A once again? Our first question is, what about typewriter forensics, such as what was performed in the U.S. versus Alger his perjury case from 1949 to 1950?
Yeah, so they want to know about typewriter identification. Is that what you said, Emily?
Yes, typewriter forensics.
Okay, yes. So in order to be able to compare a typewritten font to another document, you need to find out if you need comparable documents. So you would need documents that were created that you suspect that someone created. You need to get samples from that person that were typewritten off his typewriter. And fortunately or unfortunately, not that many people have typewriters anymore. So the typewriter cases, wow, I think the last typewriter case I had was 8 or 10 years ago. So those are cases that we're seeing fewer and fewer of, but we do see them because we have older documents popping up that need verification. So, but you do need comparable exemplars, which are, comparison documents to compare to the documents that you want to authenticate.
Okay, the next question is, what is the hardest signature to copy? Are there any? Let's see. I might. The easiest signatures. That's hard. The hardest signature, I think, for me to examine and to sometimes authenticate are the typical. They would say, "Oh, it's a doctor's signature where it's just a squiggle," and there could be a wide range of variation with that squiggle. It's just so easy to put a squiggle on the paper and pass it off as a person who does a squiggle as their normal signature. So those are difficult for me to authenticate sometimes without the right amount of known handwriting samples to compare to. The most difficult signatures, I guess, can you ask that person to clarify? Are they asking like what the most difficult signature to forge would be? Or yes, we'll ask and then. Okay, but let me give your listeners a tip. I have two very different signatures. I have one that I use for business, and I have one that I use for personal and important documents. Because my business signature might be on a document, on a report that might show up on the internet, and I don't want someone to be able to take that signature and place it on a power of attorney, a medical directive, or a will. And so, it's made very clear in my will that I have two different types of signatures. And if the signature I use for business ever shows up on an important document like a will or a contract, then already something should not be right. So I recommend that everyone adopts two different types of signatures, one for business and one for personal and legal use. Go ahead, Emily. Okay, and can you perform forensic analysis on different languages?
That is an excellent question. I happen to do authentication on Chinese handwriting, and there are other document examiners that do advertise that they can do an examination on any language, on any writing, but I say that's not so. And I actually did a talk last year at a conference in Hawaii, at a forensic handwriting conference, the pitfalls and things that other document examiners should know about doing an analysis on Chinese handwriting. Because with Chinese handwriting alone, you don't, if the person doesn't understand the language when looking at it, they won't know that there's two styles of Chinese handwriting, that there's simplified and that there's traditional. And what I compare that to is we have print and I would say that's simplified, and we would have traditional, which would be cursive. So let's pretend that, this is easy, let's pretend that we don't know how to read English. And so we would be looking, if we had a case and we need to compare certain signature or handwriting, we were looking for exact items. We're looking for the exact letter A to match that A. We're looking for the exact letter B to match that B. And because we don't know how to read read the English language, we don't understand variation, that there are many different ways to write A's, B's, and C's, because there are different handwritings out there. And so if you don't understand the written language, if you don't understand the variations, then you're not able to do an accurate analysis in that language. So I would never do an analysis on a language that does not include, Roman letters, like as we recognize in our English language, so Spanish and French, but that's all fine. I would not touch Arabic or any of those other written languages that I don't understand. But with Chinese, I'm familiar with that. I went to Chinese school when I was younger, and that's how I'm able to do it. And I have gone against two document examiners in a Chinese handwriting case, and they said, it's just comparing strokes and matching them up. It's not really that easy. So I would veer away from getting someone to do an analysis on your case in another language unless they are familiar with that language or have an understanding of how the written language is constructed. That was an excellent question, by the way, Emily.
Okay, and the next question is, if the person who forged a document admits that they signed it, but signed it at the person's direction, are there other characteristics in the person's handwriting that an expert can identify to prove that it was a deceptive act and therefore not authorized?
Oh, that's more of saying that it was a deceptive act. That's more of conjecture, state of mind, which is what a handwriting expert would not testify to. We can't testify what the person was thinking or whether it was deceptive or not. So it is acceptable that something called guided hand signatures, that if someone is elderly and they're not able to write very well, you can put a pen in their hand and kind of help support their arm and help guide them, but you're not allowed to make them sign it. So there's a clear difference there. So, guided hand is okay, but anything else is not. If they say that they had permission to sign it, then they're admitting that they did it, but to show that there was deception involved, that's a difficult one. There would have to be other documentation. For instance, that person said, these are my last wishes. They're not going to be, if anybody else tries to change it, it's not true, and that's hard to find.
Okay, and why are there so many different methods for a document examiner to be certified? Is there a movement for a unified credentialing process to ensure quality education and experience among potential experts?
Yes, that's what our field is striving for. So there's, everything is a process, and that's something that document examiners have been moving towards for years. So, but for now, what we have is the best we have, and you have to join an organization that is reputable, and there isn't just one organization that has the only standard across the field. There are many. There are a few organizations, and I would be aware if someone said, "Yeah, we're the only ones," because there really isn't. But you should ask what the process is of the certification, what types of continuing education does that group offer, and is the information that's offered by that group fully based on document examination and not, maybe graphology included, because that's not what document examination entails.
Okay, we have one more question. We do have additional questions, but we don't have time to get to those, so we will send them over to you, Cina, for them to get their questions answered. So the last question is, how are you keeping your expertise viable in the digital age?
There are so many things that can be done digitally that that a document examiner, it would be difficult for a document examiner to tell whether a signature was digitally pasted on a document or not. So most everyone is familiar with, Photoshop. And so in some cases, we just can't tell. And that's what the document examiner has to say, that there's a possibility that, the signature could have been digitally married to this document, but in this case, there's not enough information to tell because there's so much that can be done, in this digital age. And if I did answer that person's question, if there's more to it, please have them, send you an additional question so I can expound on that.
All right, well, thank you so much for answering those questions.
Oh, thank you, and I thank everyone for attending.
In addition to being your best source for testifying and consulting experts, TASA also offers e-discovery and forensic solutions, free interactive webinars, cybersecurity services, day-in-the-life videos, and research reports on expert witnesses, such as the Challenge History Report 2.0, the Professional Sanction Search, and the Expert Profile 360. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Cina Wong for her time and effort in creating this presentation. If you would like to speak with Ms. Wong, or if you would like to speak with a TASA representative regarding an expert witness for a case that you are working on, please contact TASA at 1-800-523-2319. Thank you all again for attending, and have a great day, everyone. This concludes our program for today.